Good morning, everyone. This video is the start of Unit 3, which is Sensation and Perception, and that is chapters 5 and 6 in your textbook. Whenever you discuss one, you have to discuss the other, because sensation and perception, you're going to learn right from the very beginning, they go together. We will do sensation first, which is chapter 5, and then do chapter 6, which is perception. But realistically, I got to be honest, I'm going to be talking about perception while we're still in chapter 5, sensation, because they are so interrelated. All right, so we're going to get going now. All right, in this picture, okay, I want you to take a look at it and answer the question, what do you see? I'm going to give you a little bit to look at it. So what do you see in that picture? Now, some of you have already come to a perception, others have not. Some people almost immediately had a perception. Some people took a little while longer. Some people are still searching for a perception as to what they see. Give it a little bit more time. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Now, what people see varies. Their perception varies. Now, normally we do this in class, and some of the responses that I'll get is, I have heard that I see a leopard. Other responses are, I see a dog. Some people say they perceive or see a tree. I've had people who said they see a face or a cat face. All right, I could keep going. All right, there have been some very interesting and unusual responses to this. Now, if you look at this, it's a perfect example of sensation and perception, because on here, this piece of paper, there are light waves that are being refracted or reflected off the paper. They're picked up by your eye. So basically what happens, light energy is picked up by your eye. All right, and then that light energy is converted to neural messages and sent to the brain. Now that portion is known as sensation. So where energy is detected and converted to neural messages, because that's the communication or the form of communication in our nervous system, that's referred to as sensation. Now, those messages are relayed onto the brain. The brain then takes those messages, selects, organizes, and interprets them, and that is perception. So if you look on here, the light waves that are picked up, or the light energy that is picked up by the eye, is the same, roughly the same for everyone. There might be slight variations depending on the lighting and different things of your computer, but realistically, it's the same. However, your perceptions, they vary or differ dramatically. So how we select, organize, and interpret is different based on our experience, our background, our expectations, a lot of various factors. All right, now in the middle, you can see there may be a picture of the Dalmatian, its head bending down. Some people say that's a leopard. The tree is in the upper left. Some people refer to that. The face, if you go right where the hind legs of the dog would be, and go down a little bit to the right, it looks like a little kitten face, some people say. So those are some of the ones. But as you can clearly see, this is a good example of sensation and perception. Energy, light energy is detected and converted to neural messages. Sensation. Now how those messages are selected, organized, and interpreted, that is what? Perception. Okay, so here are the definitions, pretty much what I just spoke about. Combination. Now really these two go together, which I will hit probably in the next couple slides. Okay, here's another example. What do you see? Same sensory stimuli. However, your perception may be different. Some people in this perceive a young woman. Some people perceive an old woman. Okay, once again, what do you see here? Sensation, or the stimuli that's picked up by the eye, the same. Relayed on as neural messages to the brain, but how they're selected and organized are interpreted differently by your experience, your expectations, your background. So some people perceive a duck, some people perceive a bunny. All right, now with sensation, they're going to talk about bottom up and top down processing. Now, when they're referring to bottom up processing, that is sensation. Okay, so think you got to build from the ground up. So really, what is it? It's the sensory input. So like I said, all over our body, we have sense receptors. We go out into our world. Those sense receptors detect what? Energy, pick up energy. That energy is then converted to neural messages and relayed to the brain. Now, think you got to build from the ground up with those what? Neural messages. Now, think of it as you're building from the ground up, the neural messages are coming up to the brain. Now, at the same time, as soon as those messages start to hit the brain, your brain starts to work what? Back, putting it together, selecting, organizing. Now, that's referred to as what? Top down. So, sensation is bottom up, building from the ground up with the neural messages. All right. Top down is perception. So as those messages are relayed into the brain is quickly working back this way to come to what? Our perception. Now think, some of you, when I flashed that first picture, very quickly came to a perception. So if you look, it's hard to do. With very little sensation, your brain worked back quickly this way. Okay. Now, on the other hand, some people needed more sensory information to come in, more neural messages, and as they did, then the brain worked back this way. Some people, sensory information was converted to neural messages coming in, but your brain was not able to work back this way. That's why you failed to come to what? A perception. So think, sensation and perception is really a blend. Sometimes it's going to be more sensation. You're going to need a little bit more sensation. Other times it's going to be quick working backwards perception. So it's really a combination of both at all times. So bottom up sensation, top down perception. All right, now psychophysics is the study of physical characteristics or energy and how they affect our psychological experience. Now here, let's talk about thresholds. Thresholds are important and you have to know both of these. These will definitely be covered on the test in the multiple choice section, so you have to be familiar. Now, an absolute threshold is the minimum stimulation necessary to detect a stimuli 50% of the time. So whether it be a sight, a sound, a smell, wherever you can detect it 50% of the time, that's considered your absolute threshold. So, for example, if there was a noise, we used to do this in class. I would take a watch, a Swatch watch, which makes a pretty distinct ticking sound. And I would put it at a certain point in the room, and then I'd have people walk away from it. Now think, in 10 trials, where you can detect the ticking of that watch 5 of the 10 times, that is your what? 50% or your absolute threshold. So think, with anything, can I see that stimuli? Where you can see it or detect it 50% of the time, absolute threshold. Everybody understand? Now, the thing is this. Your absolute threshold, although it has the word absolute, is anything but absolute. Think, from one day to the next, it can differ dramatically. So say on day 1, Monday, okay, the person can detect the ticking of the watch from 10 feet. Okay. Now, as we go through the end of the week by Friday, the person is very fatigued, tired, had a lot of tests and everything else. All of a sudden, it's not 10 feet any longer. They have to get a little bit what? Closer, 6, 7 feet, where they're able to detect that sound what? 50% of the time. So although it's called the absolute threshold, it doesn't mean it is absolute. It can vary from day to day, and there's many different factors that can influence that. We're going to talk about them in a minute. All right, now the difference threshold is the minimum difference between any two stimuli that you can detect 50% of the time. Okay, any two stimuli. So think it would be two smells, two weights, two lights. Where can I detect the variation or the difference 50% of the time between the two? Let's say we're going to do something with this in class. I'm going to do a demo real quick so you can get it, get an idea. Now, hold on one second. My phone is ringing. All right, I'm going to pause the video right here. All right, that's all taken care of now. Phone call. All right, now the difference threshold here. Let me try and give you an idea. It's also the difference threshold will also be referred to as the JND, or the just noticeable difference. Now, like I said, detect the difference between any two stimuli 50% of the time. Now think of it this way. I wear glasses. A lot of you wear glasses. So you go, you get your eye exam. Near the tail end of it, when they're trying to fit you for a lens, they will flip lenses. So they'll say to you real quickly, which eye is better, right or left, right or left. Now, think about it. You're like right, right, left, right, left, left. Then you get to the point where what? You really can't detect the difference between the two lenses. You're like, they're about the same. Now, think, at that point, have you passed the JND? You have. All right, so think where you can detect it 50% of the time between those two lenses, like that one is better, that one's worse, where you can do that 5 out of 10 times, that is your what? Difference threshold, or your JND. Now, when you can no longer detect the difference between the two lenses, you have gone beyond the JND, or the difference threshold. Hopefully that clears things up a little bit. All right, signal detection theories. Think theory. Right? Theories do what? They explain things. So basically, signal detection theory explains or predicts when you will be able to what? Detect faint stimulus or signals. Now, once again, like I said, there's no absolute threshold. It can change. Now, what can make it change? Detection, as you can see, experience, expectation, motivation, and level of fatigue all play a big role. Now, for experience, let me give you an example. Experience with something makes you more likely to detect a faint stimuli. So, for example, prior to having children, a faint whimper or cry from a baby is something that I would what? Fail to detect. Now, once I had children and was a mother, the very faintest cry or whimper of a child is something that I would what? Pick up on or detect. Now, someone without children may not. So that's experience playing in. Now, think of expectations. Let's use your cell phone. Okay, so your cell phone is in another room, like in the room next to you. It's on vibrate. You're expecting a call. So even that very faint signal, although you're in another room, immediately you detect it and pick it up. Now, on the other hand, if you were not expecting a call, that same call may have gone what? Unnoticed. All right, so expectation. Now, motivation. Think if the call was really important, okay, a really big event was happening, or tickets to a concert, or something you really want to do, your motivation would be very high, so you'll be more likely to what? Detect it. In the book, they give examples. Think of soldiers who are on guard duty here in the United States at a local base versus in Iraq or Afghanistan. Now, think in Iraq or Afghanistan, the motivation is much higher. If you fail to detect it, it could be a loss of life. So motivation is extremely high, so you're more likely to detect very what? Faint stimuli. Now, level of fatigue, we know, you know this, when you're very tired or fatigued, do you fail to detect faint stimuli? All the time. Think. This becomes problematic in certain professions. Surgeons, long surgeries. Okay, the longer you're in surgery, might you fail to detect something very minor? Yeah. Airport screeners, and you could go on and on. So level of fatigue definitely plays in, and you know that from real life experience. All right, sensation thresholds, it's saying that anything below 50%, so think your absolute threshold is where you can detect a stimuli 50% of the time. Anything below that 50% of the time, you may detect it some of the time and other times not. That's considered what? Subliminal. Now, this brings us to the age-old question of subliminal messaging. So this was always a really big deal. People are always really interested in it. The whole idea of messages being relayed subliminally and then influencing people's behavior. So we've heard everything from movie theaters that would embed very faint messages, spoken messages to buy more products like soda and popcorn at the movie theaters. We've heard things about Beatles records, that if certain Beatles songs, there were satanic messages that were telling people to do bad things. More recently in the film Little Mermaid, in the graphics, there were messages that were encouraging people to do certain things. Now, the whole idea, other people have done this, like where you can have subliminal messages so you can quit smoking or speak another language or all sorts of things, all sorts of claims. So the idea is two big questions you have to ask yourself. Okay. One, can we unconsciously sense subliminal stimuli? So can we sense stimuli below our conscious awareness? Okay, that's the first one. Now, the second is, without our awareness, can the stimuli have suggestive powers? So can it get us to do things? Now, the first one, can we sense subliminal stimuli? And the answer is yes. We just had the definition that anything below our absolute threshold is considered what? Subliminal, all right? Plus, you also know this. A lot of times in experiments, people have been asked to make perceptual judgments. So they'll give them two weights and say, which is heavier. Now, what we know is when they do that, they don't know how they know, but do they perform better than chance or 50%? Yes, in getting it right. So the whole thing is sometimes we know more than we think we do or what we're consciously aware of. So can we sense stimuli below, or can we sense stimuli unconsciously? Yeah, it's below our absolute threshold. So the answer to that is yes. Now, the thing is, say we sense it. Our sense receptors take the information, it goes to our brain, we sensed it, we're not consciously aware of it. Could it then influence our behavior? Now, you got to be careful with this. The answer is it can influence our behavior somewhat. Now, it's not going to change our behavior dramatically. It's not going to get us to do things that we would normally never do. Now, the big term here that you have to know, it's going to come up over and over again, is priming. So with stimuli that is below our conscious awareness, can it prime us? Yes, the answer to that is yes, definitely. Now, priming is with the activation unconsciously of certain associations. Now, those associations then have us respond a certain way, all right, in our perception, our memories, or our response. Now, let me explain the research. It says right there, you can see i.e. kittens, romantic couples versus werewolves and dead bodies. Now, this is what they did. All right, they primed people. So, for example, they would flash pictures of either kittens and romantic couples, so those types of positive images, or they would flash werewolves and dead bodies, negative images. Now, they would flash these so quickly, all right, and then interrupt processing so that all the people could report seeing was a flash of light. If they asked them what was the picture of, they could not give any information. It was just a flash of light. So they would flash the kittens and the romantic couples first, or the werewolves and dead bodies. Then they would follow that up with a second photo, which they would show and ask the person to rate on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, what they found was when kittens and romantic couples were flashed first, the people would rate the follow-up photo much, much higher, give it a much more positive rating. Now, when the werewolves and dead bodies were flashed first, and then a follow-up picture after it, those pictures, the follow-ups, were rated much more negatively, given a much more unfavorable rating. Now, what it shows or illustrates, the first image is flashed, sensed, but the person is not what? Consciously aware of what they saw. They can't tell you what they saw. However, is it influencing the way they react to the second stimulus? And the answer clearly is yes. So can human beings be primed? The answer is yes. So you can detect that stimuli. It can also have an influence on you without you even being what? Consciously aware. Now, priming is different than totally altering or changing someone's behavior or getting someone to do something that they what? Wouldn't do. All right, so you got to keep that in mind. Now, another example of priming that they've done is they'll put people in a room and very faintly they'll have either upbeat music or very downbeat, all right, more depressing music. So in the one room, upbeat, happy music, the other downbeat, depressing music. They will then give a spelling test in the rooms. They will ask people to spell certain words. Now, for example, the word morning. Now, in the upbeat room, they spell it M-O-R-N-I-N-G. In the more downbeat, depressing, they spell it M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. Now, they do it with several words. For example, not only morning, they'll do pain. So the depressing room, P-A-I-N, whereas more likely in the other room, upbeat room, it's P-A-N-E, like a window pane. Another word they'll use is die, so it will be D-I-E in the depressing, whereas in the upbeat room, it will be D-Y-E, like dye for coloring of clothes. So you can see they're being what? Primed. Okay, so priming can influence our behavior without us what? Ever being consciously aware of it. So you should realize that. Our body, our sensory receptors sense stimuli, send it to our brain. Now our brain is working, putting it all together. Now sometimes we're consciously aware of what it's doing and other times we are not, and yet we're kind of like on autopilot reacting to things without even what? Being consciously aware. All right, Weber's law has to do with thresholds and things of that nature. To perceive a difference between any two stimuli, they must differ by a constant proportion. So if I have two weights, there's a difference. Now, say if I change the one weight, I have to maintain that constant proportion or I would not be able to detect the difference any longer. Now, I'm going to do an activity in class which will kind of drive this home so you have an idea. All right, now the next thing right there is sensory adaptation, one of the last concepts I think we need to discuss in this section. Sensory adaptation is diminished sensitivity to constant stimulation. So you know this. You put on a pair of pants or a pair of shoes. They're very tight. When you first put them on, they're tight. After a little while, they're not so tight anymore. Now think, the cells, okay, in your skin you have cells, pressure, they're firing. Okay, they're sending that message. Now, it's an unchanging stimuli, so slowly it stops what? Firing or sending the message. Think about it, you know it. You walk in a room, it stinks, it smells really bad. People walk into my classroom all the time, it stinks in here, it stinks in here. I'm like, it's not me. All right. Now, the thing is, do I smell it? No, because I've been sitting there. Originally, my cells were what? Firing, saying it stinks, but after a little while, they stop firing. So does the smell bother me anymore? No, but the person just walking into the room, are they going to be bothered by the smell? Yep, you know it. You jump in the ocean, freezing cold. Okay, after a couple minutes, not so cold anymore. Firing, stop firing. That's sensory adaptation. So that's diminished sensitivity at the level of the what? Cell and firing. Okay, I think that brings us to the end. Let me check one more slide. Yep, we're good. We're going to stop here for today until the next video. All right, bye everybody.